Thank you so much, Brittany. I'm Kate Schaefers, and I'm here to introduce you to our speaker, George Dow. Since 1989, George has helped business and nonprofit leaders improve their career transition effectiveness and ensure fit with their future direction. He helps his clients through assessments, identification of options, and coaching to achieve the desired results, both professionally and personally. George has also taught graduate and undergraduate career management courses at the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management, and he was a Faculty of the Year nominee in 2005. A dedicated industry leader, George has been president of the Minnesota Association of Career Management Professionals and a board member of the International Association of Career Management Professionals. He received the Jules Curlin Lifetime Achievement Award from the Minnesota Career Development Association in 2009. And personally, George is one of the best career coaches I have ever met, and I am just thrilled that he's here today. George, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kate, so much. That was a very kind introduction, and I'm ready to go. What I'm about to share with you is a model that I created about 15 years ago. I spent about 21 years in a career transition firm called Right Management, and about halfway through my time there, I realized we need something that can name the choices people have when they're at the crossroads and to speak to degree of difficulty and economic consequences. So being a fairly creative person, I relished the opportunity to create something to help shed some light on what are people's choices and what are their strategies when they're at a crossroads. And I like to use this metaphor, a valley metaphor, to help people understand what I'm talking about as far as the 9 choices and the degree of difficulty. Because you can imagine when you go to the bright side of this, you're going to go up the mountain and it's going to get increasingly more difficult. If you go to the left side, the same challenge. If you're on the flat land, it will be a little bit less strenuous. And I'll be your guide. That's me. That's a Sherpa. That's actually not me literally, but metaphorically, that's me. And I'm going to show you, if you put a grid on top of the career alternatives that I'm about to share with you, you'll see that on the bottom is money, where you see money and you go to the right and it's less or equal or more money. If you go to the right side, the valley that goes up from the valley on the right side, if you go to the left, it's less money as you consider those options. And then the degree of difficulty gets higher as you go higher in the model. You'll either leave or explore on the left or the right side, or stay and grow in the middle. So let me take it even further to show you what it looks like in graphical form. My son helped me with this. I told him this is what I wanted to communicate, that there are these 9 choices. And as you see again, right or left is money, up higher is more difficult. So I'm going to take you through this point by point. But I also want to tell you that on my website, it's georgedow.com, www.georgedow.com. If you go to the 2018 series, the first 3 months are going to be the how to transition or transform your career. The next 9 will be each of these 9 career alternatives I'm about to describe to you with a case study for each. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the case study. And if you want to dig into any more details, again, go to the last 9 blogs in 2018. My website, just go to the upper right-hand side. It's blog archives, and you'll be able to go into more detail. So let me just talk you through these, and then I'm going to talk to you about the how-to. This will speak to the successes of clients I've worked with over the years in each of these categories. New environment, I'll describe it first. Change industries, work culture, size or type of firm, but continue in a similar function. So one of my clients I have the blog series is a woman that went from an IT position in a large for-profit to a large nonprofit. And what she found was really interesting is that one of the assumptions is when you move from the for-profit to the nonprofit sector, you're going to take on jobs that are less lucrative financially. The interesting thing was that she didn't lose income. The nonprofit paid her very similar to where she was before. What she really liked was the mission felt more personally engaging to her, more emotionally connected to the engagement of a nonprofit than a for-profit. So that was an example of a similar function, but a new environment, moving from for-profit to nonprofit. The next option is new terms. I'll describe it to you now. New terms change compensation terms, including contract work, part-time, and or flexible schedule. The example in the blogs that I sent is a man that followed his wife, who became a president of a nonprofit institution, and he ended up having no network except for hers. So he was able to tap her network to find a couple of different things: a half-time job at that city's United Way in marketing, and then 2 adjunct professor titles, 2 different classes in a university, actually the same university that she was working in. So new terms for him was to also find a new network, a new reality for a new city and everything, but he was able to successfully tap the people that she was working with to get into contract work and half-time work. The next example for new venture, this is one of my favorites because I learned it from my 8th grade English teacher. I met him about 8 years ago. He had turned 60, and his son said, we should start a business. And he had been a corporate person for his whole career. And what happened is that when his son said, we should start a business or buy a business, actually his daughter found a business in data storage. And this man acquired the business, and he ended up doing very well. But what he found, and this is why, again, this is increasing difficulty. Right after he bought the business, his mother passed away. She got very sick for a period of about 4 or 5 months, and then she passed away. And he spent so much time with her, the business almost failed, because it is so difficult to have a business be successful without a lot of vigilance. And he had been a corporate person, so he was used to delegating. He delegated to his son, and his son wasn't quite ready. Fortunately, he could come back after about 6 months of helping with his mother's estate, his mother's decline, and salvage the business. So he's doing fine now. But you can read that story, and you can see the extreme challenges that can be faced with a new venture. The left side, this is probably the most popular blog I've ever done, and it's called Downshift Role. The definition would be move from your most recent role to a lower level of responsibility and or lower title. Again, the most popular blog I've ever done, because this woman that I was working with realized there was a really good opportunity in California. And I said, okay, so are you ready to relocate? And she said, well, this is a job that's a couple of levels lower. And I said, well, I've got a couple questions for you. First of all, would the job be engaging? Would you be challenged and interested in going to work every day? She said, I would. Second, I said, is this a good company? Would you like the culture, the boss? She said, I know the boss, and I think I work really well with her. And the company's really a solid company with a very good culture. And said, okay, that's 2 green lights. Third question is, how about the personal factors? How about living in California, and you'd be making less money because it's a lower level job? Could you do that and afford a life in California, Silicon Valley? She said, I'm in a 2-income situation. They pay well. I do just fine financially. And I said, and she said, by the way, my son and daughter-in-law and grandson live right in this area, right in Silicon Valley. And I asked, did you mention that? And she said, well, no, that's an illegal question. I'm in human resources. They can't ask me that question. I said, well, they can't ask you that, but that couldn't stop you from offering that as one of the incentives to want to relocate to Silicon Valley for this company. So it was a Wednesday when she called me, and she said, by the way, they're going to let me know Friday. They think I'm overqualified. So they're going to let me know Friday if I'm still in the running. And it was Wednesday when she told me that. I said, you've just told me that this is a really good job, a really good organization, and you'd be happy to move to California. Money is fine, and your grandson and son and daughter-in-law are there. I want you to call the hiring manager now. It's Wednesday. Because if you hold off, they're going to wonder if you also doubt that you'd fit in this job. Well, she did that. She called on the Wednesday, and she got the job offer on a Thursday. So the title of this blog is From Overqualified to When Can You Start? So take a look at it, because a lot of people who are further along in their careers find opportunities with a really good company, but it's a level or 2 down. Read that if you want to get some really good ideas on how to deal with the overqualified label. Portfolio life, the next one, redistribute time committed to work, community, and personal activities. And one of my clients that I highlighted in this blog is somebody who found a half-time job at a nonprofit, and the other half of his time he could spend with personal pursuits, giving back, leisure. Portfolio life is personal, professional, and community time redistributed so that you spend a lot less time at work and more time in life. Usually reserved for those of us a little bit further along, and where money isn't as big a driver. New work. I have a client that at one time was a controller at an energy company, and now he is a professor. He teaches, and that was a big change for him. But he started out as a small experiment. He came as a guest lecturer. Before you know it, they said, we need you to teach. And one thing led to another. And he realized that he was happy as an instructor and really fell in love with teaching, which is quite different from being a controller at a energy company. But I think you'd have to, again, take a look and see for yourself what that transition is like. Sabbatical, I had a client that at age 50, he left his company. He had a package, and he decided he was totally burned out and that he would take a trip around the world with his wife because he had, again, a severance package that allowed him to have some time away. And you can still buy those plane tickets where you can go all the way around the world if you go the same direction the whole time. And they stayed in, he was 50 years old, but he stayed in youth hostels with his wife and did odd jobs and went all over the world. And after 6 months of going around the world, he was regenerated, rejuvenated, recharged. He was ready to go back, and he went back to actually contract work after that, but took on a series of contract work. So he went to new terms. But he said, I was so glad I did that sabbatical because I was really burned out. It's sort of like the great resignation now, where you feel like a lot of people are taking a break because they're just so burned out. Rejuvenated him. Continuation, I did a story about my sister. She is 70, and it's stay in the same company or do the same work forever. Very similar or identical work environment and employment terms. By the way, I should go back and read the definition also of sabbatical. Sabbatical is intentional time off for personal reasons, professional renewal, and or development. So sorry, I forgot to mention what sabbatical is. But with my sister's story, I think she might just work till she's 80. You never know. But some people just say, I'm glad to know all my choices, but I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'll just keep doing it. Other people are going to probably continue to do what they're doing, but they're bridging to something else. And I'll describe what that means now. Moving from one option to another over time. Establish bent timelines and personal work and financial benchmarks. Build bridges to the next step while on the current path. I'd have to say this is me. I did a case study of myself because when I turned 56, I went to new venture. I started my solo practice at age 56, and at age 65, I decided, okay, I am going to now shrink my practice, and I'm going to move to a portfolio life. And so because I had spent about 8 years in that practice, building the practice of solo consulting, I could just say, I'm going to take fewer clients on. I'm going to shrink my practice to what is now about 2 clients a day, and then grow the other elements of a portfolio life, which is, besides working the form you want, learning development. I'm taking a lot of OLLI classes. I am also giving back to my church, doing some tutoring, mentoring, and work with the History Theater on the board. I'm doing yoga and playing hockey, and also enjoying movies and streaming on Netflix and all those leisure things. So anybody that wants to know about portfolio life, you can read my study, my case study at the end. So that's the 9 choices. And again, you might have some questions on these, but I want to work you through the how-to next, so that if you have questions, I'll take you through the process of both a transition and a transformation, because a transformation would represent a radical shift. Transition would be more of a minor shift, a more familiar path, and you can see the path on the right. It always starts with self-assessment. We have to think about what are our skills, our interests, and values. What's our history? What does our history teach us about who we are, what we have been, what we've liked, what we haven't liked? I like Soren Kierkegaard's comment that life is lived forward but understood backwards. And I like to say, look back at your 10 top achievements. What do they say about you in terms of your skills, your interests, your values, and what really turns you on about various kinds of work that you do? Research, we have to use the internet and conversations with people to figure out what is this maybe new organization we'd like to occupy, or a new direction, but it's still similar to what we've been doing. You've got to focus, and I'll give you the 5 questions that you need to focus on when you're networking. We have to plan out how we're going to go about going to the marketplace, develop our resume, develop the LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn information, as well as networking skills and interviewing skills, negotiating skills, develop ourselves, network like crazy, campaign. I think since 65 to 80% of jobs are found through networking, that's probably how most people should spend most of their time, about 70% of their time networking. And also, this is the happy ending, and then the beyond landing, grow your career. Again, I can cover any of these in the Q&A section, but I'm going to move on to transformation now. Same starting point. It's always going to be self-assessment first, and then naming new possibilities. What are the possibilities? I've sometimes brought to people the strong interest inventory. Other times they've brought ideas to me and thinking I could do this, that, or the other thing. And what I've sometimes said is, if you take a pebble and drop the pebble in the water, right under that pebble is a job just like the job you had in the same kind of organization. What's one ripple out? What's 2 ripples out? Where there's still some relationship to where the pebble fell into the water, but it's starting to get out a little further and further. This might be 3 or 4 ripples out, but there's still some relevance to our history. So new possibilities, researching those on the internet and through conversations. This next section comes from Herminia Ibarra, who in about 2003, I think it was a game changer. And she said, don't get analysis paralysis and just spend your time navel gazing and figuring out, doing exercises all the time. She said, this should be action biased to do a transformation. And in her book, Working Identity, there's all sorts of case studies of radical transformations that adults make that are 10, 15, 20, 30 years beyond college. Craft small experiments before you make a bigger commitment. Try it to see what it's like. Shift connections. Don't keep going back to the same connections that might be very familiar to you, but shift connections to people that do what you're thinking about doing and let them guide you. And after you've had enough small experiments, after you've had enough conversations and guides to show you the new ways, see if it makes sense. That'd be the 3rd part of Ibarra's model. She'd say craft experiments, shift connections, and then make sense. Should I keep doing this? Does this make sense to keep doing this? If it does, maybe you go for it. But if it doesn't, you have to circle back and go back to maybe self-assessment and find a different path. But I highly encourage you to read that book, Working Identity. I think it's liberating. It expands people's thinkings, boundaries. And I know, Kate, you're a big fan of it because you and I have done a lot of career work together and in different paths we've taken. But we keep coming back to Working Identity by Ibarra. So let me talk about the 3 main factors. And I shared these with you when I talked about from overqualified to when can you start. These are always 3 really important factors when you're considering, what do I want to do next? The job, just like I mentioned, the woman, I said, is the job engaging? Would I look forward to going to work? Does it get me really interested? Does it use my preferred skills? Is this the job that's going to get me excited about going to work on Monday? Number 2, the organization. And I often say this is an organization, meaning it's the culture, it's the health of the organization, it's the boss, it's how this place feels and how strong it is in the marketplace, how good an organization, how proud you would be or otherwise working for this organization. Would you like to attach your name to this organization? Because the organization, to an extent, becomes your identity. Where you work is, to an extent, who you are. And the 3rd question, the personal, that's typically looking at the money and looking at the location, looking at the hours that you'd be working. I mentioned this woman that was going to move to California, and most people are very nervous about, would you really be okay relocating? Well, a lot of people these days are commuting. Well, that certainly has personal implications. There's a lot of people that commute, and it affects their personal life and how much time is left for my family. So personal is the location, the time, the money, the space, and so on. And then your network has these questions for you. Now, over the years, I've had the time to, it's almost like I go back and forth with my clients. If I offer good advice, they'll nod. If I offer bad advice, they'll push back, because these are executives, right? They're not shy about telling me if I'm right or wrong. And so over the years, this next one, and really most of the ones I've shared with you so far, have stood the test of time. And these 5 questions are typically what you're going to get. The first question is almost always going to be, what happened? If you're thinking about a change, or if you've already changed, tell them about it, and be honest, but don't slam your former employer. Be very careful to take the high road, and have a shorter and a longer version. And I spend a lot of time with my clients. For most of my 21 years at Right Management, where I started, it was people that are laid off. So I had to say, don't slam yourself and don't slam them, but find a way to script it, write it down, practice it, share it with other people, and be ready for the longer version, because they might say, well, tell me more. So be ready for both versions, practice it, script it, get that down, because that's the gatekeeper. If you can't get past that, then it's hard to get, then they start to lose trust with you, or they start to wonder about you if you can't give them a cogent explanation of why you left or why you're thinking about leaving. Usually the short version is just fine. They'll ask you, what do you want to do next? And they want to know a specific role. Tell me the title. Tell me, help me understand what specifically you want to do next, so that I can latch onto it and make the right kind of referrals to the right kind of people if you're in my network. And then this next one's kind of a branding statement. What makes you a strong candidate for this work? What are you especially good at, passionate about, and where's your proof? So again, even if you're making a change, you still bring skills to work. You still bring attributes to your work. But they want to know, if you're talking about a particular direction, uh, they want to hear some excitement in your voice. They want to hear some passion, so you're not looking like a lost soul, but somebody who has some excitement. Maybe you don't know everything you need to know about it, and you're searching, you're learning, but they want to feel your energy. They want to feel your excitement about it, and also hear about where your skills are, where your strengths are, what you bring to the table. And then, where do you want to work? They want to know what size, and they like numbers too. Tell me what size of organization would be a good fit for you. And if you say small, medium, or large, they'll say, does that mean 100,000 employees, or 500 million in revenue, a billion? Oftentimes people think in numbers of employees, or revenue figures. Stage, I mean life cycle stage. Are they early stage, mature stage, turnaround stage? What industry? And people like to know, do you want to stay in your industry or change industries? The culture, what kind of a culture fits you best? And what location do you prefer? And again, sometimes that's local, relocation, or commuting. So those questions, and then they finally ask you, how can I help you? And what I've put in brackets here is 4 really good words that you can use. How can you help me? Visibility, let people know I'm looking. Information, I've named some companies that I'm interested in. What can you tell me about those companies? Advice, if you were in my shoes, and most people have been in the shoes of a job changer at some point, either on their own or been pushed out. Advice, and then referrals at the end. You notice I put referrals last, because referrals are very personal. And when somebody's about to give you a referral, they're thinking, am I comfortable giving this referral? You're going to represent me. It's very personal. And are you ready for me to give you that referral? Are you ready to represent me well? Because when I give you my name to use, you're representing me. So it's very personal. So they want to get comfortable in all these things. And the most important, of course, is the referral. So here's the 5 ways I think people are judged. The first is ability. Can you do this work, and can you prove it with your examples? I usually use CAR, could use STAR, but challenge, action, results, story. I want people to think about a 3-part model for communicating your abilities. I always say, start with a list of the top 5 or 10 things that you think an organization wants if they're hiring. What are the 5 to 10 things that they want? What do they need? Start with that. And then your abilities. In the middle column, what do you offer? Where you say, I've been there, done that, or I can do that, or I have transferable skills, or I'm a quick study. I can do that. So what they need first, what you offer in your abilities second, and then your stories third. And the third column is maybe one story for each of the 5 to 10 things that they need, which is a challenge, action, result format, where you can say, to the extent possible, I've been there, I've done that. I've got the ability, I've got the proven ability because I've had relevant experience that matches what you need. Needs, qualifications, and stories. They want to know you're motivated. If you have the abilities without the drive, especially if this group looking at this video is in the mid to late stage of your career, there's always a question: are you still passionate when you're in your 50s or 60s, let's say? And there's a question: do you still have the drive? Maybe you've got good stories from the past, and that's predictive, but are you still motivated today, and will you be motivated tomorrow and the next day and beyond? So motivation is about your achievements and your energy, and then fit. Oftentimes recruiters would tell us fit is the most important thing. I'd have recruiters come every month to write management, and the executives that were in the room, 30 of them, 40, would say, what's the number one thing you're looking for in a candidate? And they'd almost always say fit. And then you say, what is fit? Well, I guess the simplest way to say fit is it's how you do the things you do. And let me give you an example. A recruiter would say, I can get 3 candidates, my finalists they'll all have the ability, they'll all have the motivation, but the real kicker will be who will fit this culture, who will fit this boss, who will fit these coworkers, who will fit this work climate, the vendors, the customers, you name it. And fit is, again, a subjective word, and it could be a dangerous word for discrimination. So there's a very charged word these days, especially with the discriminatory issues in the workplace. But still, no matter what your situation, you do have to think, okay, if I've got ability and motivation, but I don't fit, it's not going to work. So that's what hiring managers are thinking about. Will this person fit our culture? And then next, competitive. With each candidate, you're not competing against the job specs. You're competing against other candidates. So it's important to always remember that. If you don't get the job, it might not be that you weren't the most qualified candidate. By comparison to your competition, they might have said, this other person fits better or somehow has a better profile than you. And then connected. Why connected? Well, connected people are more trustworthy because strangers are harder to know whether or not they're going to be who they say they are. So connected means you have a sponsor. And that's why, again, 65 to 80%, that was 30 years plus, it's always been 65 to 80% probability that your next job comes through connections, because trust comes from connections. And employers want to be able to trust you, and they trust you by hearing the good words of people that advocate for you. So it kind of gets down to that. So last thing, and then I'm going to open up to questions. 4 keys. I think structure is very important. And I've given you structure for a transition, structure for a transformation, and the structure that speaks to 9 career alternatives also helps you. And I've tried to share with you a number of structures that I think will be helpful to you. And again, you'll go back to my website, georgedow.com, 2018, and you can see all these how-tos in 3 blogs and then 9 of the case studies. Support. I think it's really important to have people that you can get support from, that it's really emotionally difficult. All these years I've spent in this profession, I felt like I've been a supportive person to people whose emotional embers have sort of gone out, or they're just a flicker, and you feel so small when you've been laid off, terminated, or you quit and you don't have something new. You need support to kind of keep the flames of your self-confidence and belief in yourself going, because it's so easy to feel beat up going through this process. And then creativity. I've given you 9 different avenues, and also just sometimes you have to go around and over or under instead of just keep banging your head against the wall. You need to be creative about how you deal with obstacles. And then finally, courage, because when you think about a transformation, a radical change, it takes a lot of courage. I think of a metaphor of a person in a trapeze bar. We get so close, and then we don't want to let go, so we pull back, and then we get really close, and at some point you got to let go of that trapeze bar to get to the other side. So it takes a lot of courage to let go of the familiar and move on to the next spot. So with that, I'm going to stop, because that was my half hour of lecture, and I'm going to open up to questions now and see what I can do to escape from this and try to move into. Did I do it successfully?
We still have your screen,
Oh,
so you
so I got to get
can.
out of my screen, which, let's see. Am I out of the screen now?
Yes, yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Oh, now you're back in.
Oh, I don't want to be back in. Let's see. Oh,
There,
maybe.
that's
Am I
perfect.
good now?
You're good now, yes.
Okay.
So thank you so much, George. That was wonderful to just kind of hear your approach and just understanding the options people have. I'm struck to we have so much conversation today around the Great Resignation and how people are just weary. I mean, they're weary from the pandemic, of course, but they're also saying work has to shift for me. Work isn't working for me. And I get a sense that so much of what the focus is on leaving and stepping away from something. But what I hear in your conversation is that what we're talking about is going towards something and thinking about those questions. So, could you talk a little bit about just what are some of those important questions people need to ask themselves as they think about what's next?
Yeah, big question is, do I stay or do I go? Can I do this bridging out to something else while I'm employed, or should I quit and just give it 100%? And what's interesting is that I think if you picture that you're over here and there's this other job or opportunity over here, and in between there's kind of a moat or there's a valley. What I often say to people that are employed that are thinking about moving over here to the other side is it's like tossing down mattresses. And you toss down the self-assessment mattress and you get to know yourself better. You toss down the research mattress and you start to look for what are other opportunities. Maybe you do informational interviews. You maybe you craft experiments. And it's like tossing down mattresses so that you can either jump and there's something to break your fall because you've done your self-assessment, you've done your informational interviews, you've done your resume, your LinkedIn, you've done all your foundational things that represent a cushion that'll break your fall so you won't crash into the basement, but rather if you jump, you can climb up and put your if you jump early, it's going to be intense, but you won't hurt yourself as much. You can create some steps. And other people just put down so many mattresses of self-assessment, market research, resume, LinkedIn, uh, informational interviewing, and then job interviewing so that they can literally walk across to the other side. So when you get pushed off, you bang, you crash into the concrete down below. That's pretty hard on people, very difficult on people. Then you have to build your steps up. But I suggest some metaphorical mattress tossing in order to build a cushion to either be able to walk across or jump and something breaks your fall. That's just my best way to approach it. I have quit jobs before. I've quit a job, and sometimes you have to do that because you can't
Mhm.
stand it anymore, and you can't find any time or energy to do those things to build the mattresses up. So sometimes that makes sense. But if you can build a bridge for yourself, I think that's a little bit safer, a little healthier if you can do it.
Mhm. Well, and it's about recalibrating some things. So you can take a big leap, but maybe you can also take small steps in those mattresses. Like you're building that process to allow yourself to make a change.
That's right. And you can see all that in my first three blogs in 2018. I speak to this process in more detail.
Mhm. And I think for a lot of people, so there's the people who are just ready to leap and they're not necessarily looking, but then there's also for people, I mean, inertia can be a big deterrent. It's especially if our jobs are not a great fit, but they're not so bad that you have no choice to leave. Can you talk a little bit about overcoming inertia?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to do this on our own. And a lot of times people they get caught up in analysis paralysis. They're doing all these exercises. They maybe get workbooks and they're just spending so much time writing and writing and writing. I think two things that are really important is to move to goal partners support, whether it be a coach or a success team, and then taking the actions that we've talked about, the actions that are in my three blogs. But I think that it starts with saying, maybe if I just keep myself alone, I won't be chipping away at this. I'll give you an example. I went to a workshop once and they said, you go to a workshop and you're all fired up by the end of the workshop. And then 2 weeks later, you're back down to ground zero because we tend to lose things if we just go to a workshop or maybe read a book. But if you're either with a coach or a success team, the line can go up because it's almost like scallops or waves because we have to be accountable to talk to our coach or our goal partners, and then we maybe slide a little bit. But we have a meeting in a week, so we have to meet this person. I got to meet this person because I've been given assignments, and then I meet and okay, I made some progress, but I'll regress for a while. Well, the accountability coach or the accountability partners keeps it more of waves going upwards rather than a book or a workshop and then 2 weeks later, bang, we're back down to zero. So I think it's people and not just committing to ourselves, but committing to other people to continue the process and have accountability partners that really makes a difference. Because I prefer action bias than just doing more exercises, more reading, more navel gazing.
Yes. So we have a great question from the audience. She wants to know, can you give some examples of what it means to craft experiments?
Sure. Um, I think I'll give you an example of a volunteer thing I did. We were in Argentina, and my son said we need a dog. There's stray dogs everywhere in Argentina, and I said, "Oh, a dog? Yeah, you're with us 2 more years, and then you're off to college, and we'll have a dog for 10 years." We didn't want that burden, so we said, "Well, I remember the Ibarra model as craft experiments and shift connections." So I said, "Okay, maybe we could raise a service dog." And what we did is we went over to learn about helping paws. And the experiments that we ran were to go to the training sessions and actually be there and watch what the sessions were all about. And then I also ended up shifting connections by talking to the instructors, talking to the people that train the dogs as volunteers and also the instructors. So it's actually go on site. And when it comes to jobs, I think some of the best experiments would be if somebody could allow you to let you shadow them and have a long conversation about what is your typical day like, and can I even accompany you to some of your work that you're doing. And again, it depends on what kind of work they're doing and how comfortable they are having a guest to actually go with them. Or the other experiment might be I think there's a lot of volunteer experiences that can mimic what you do in paid occupations. So sometimes you can be volunteering as an experiment. Try something, whether it's sales, development, leading a team. You can do it as a volunteer sometimes and get the same kind of skill development and say, I'd use these same skills if I took on this kind of job. I can experiment over here and see if I like it, and then use that on my resume and my interviews that I've got transferable skills because as in this volunteer experience, I did the same kind of things I would be doing in this job. So there's a couple of different thoughts, one for volunteer, one for paid work.
Yeah, and I love that. And it could also be stretch assignments or volunteering for a committee at work or,
Um,
giving yourself those opportunities to see what it's like to do a different kind of role or project so you can also not only build that experience, which you can put on your resume and LinkedIn profile, but also see if it's a good fit.
that's right. And you and I know that school oftentimes has simulations too. And University of Minnesota would have some classes where you could simulate some of these things.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes going back to school, we know that lifelong learning is important for us. I mean, we can't stay doing the same thing the same way we've always done it. So finding those opportunities to learn and grow, but a certificate program or maybe taking a class to see if something is interesting to you might also help open up your eyes.
Yeah, school more and more is trying to be applied and real world oriented. So yeah, that's good. Any other questions that you got down there?
Yeah. So, I think too that, we've seen some people who have been just thrown into this and, whether they're laid off and they're needing to navigate this new reality and maybe didn't prepare for it. I get a sense when we can be intentional, it's a little easier. But what happens when you're just thrown into the mix and suddenly you're doing a career change?
Yeah, I've had a lot of clients like that, and in fact, I did a workshop on that very topic about dealing with the transition and the emotional aspect of it. And I often refer to the work of William Bridges. And when you're in a transition, a lot of times you have to understand that there's three parts to it. One is the ending of what has been, And there's some grief to that. There's some waves of grief that come to that. The next stage is not a new beginning necessarily, but a neutral zone or a wilderness where you feel confusion and some emptiness, and then eventually the new beginning. So what I encourage people to do is to recognize that there's an emotional element. There's a time to regroup, and you might not be in your best self, your best mindset right away. You might need a little time to regroup and recognize that if you go too quickly, you might not put your best foot forward. So to try to get grounded both emotionally and intellectually, so that emotionally you're not desperate, that you're not sounding depressed or angry. The worst thing is to come across angry and resentful and have a chip on your shoulder. And that might take a little bit of time and understanding. And then that there's some ambiguity and some confusion, but uh, to maybe not jump from the ending to a new beginning, because some people I know have jumped right into a new job that's has all the same bad qualities of the last job. If you're not careful, the devil can sometimes be your next job. So you have to try to get some objectivity and perspective on what represents a good job, a good organization, and good personal factors, so that I take good care of myself and don't just jump from loss to some new thing. You got to know yourself and what's good for yourself, and not just be desperate and take the first thing.
Mhm. And it's also the story you tell, and you mentioned that in your presentation too, about just how do you frame it, what do you say, what is the
Yes,
story around this? And I think
right.
it's having that positive piece of being able to tell a story that makes sense for an employer, but then also for you, so you're at peace with some of those changes.
Yeah, right away within the first session, I'll find myself saying, we need to get this reason for leaving statement so that it's clean. It's not slamming you, it's not slamming your former boss. It's
Mhm.
got to be the high road.
So, George, any last words of wisdom as we close out and go to a 10-minute mindfulness break?
Oh, that sounds good. Well, my advice is go to your mindfulness break, because again, this is stressful stuff. But I would encourage you to feel free. It's all free and there's no strings attached. Go to my blog, georgedow.com, 2018, and the entire year was dedicated to this topic of 3 how-to blogs and then 9 on each of these 9 career alternatives. And good luck to everybody. I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, George.